Hello again, this video got a bit too long, so I'm going to split it into two parts. I spend most of the video inside this simulation component here, and by the end of it we should have 4 events that are set up something like this, and it all comes together in the next video, so stay tuned for that, and I hope you're enjoying this tutorial series so far. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is add a custom event. We'll call this start/reset simulation. I'm going to give it 2 inputs. One of them is going to be a skeletal mesh. One of them is going to be a name. Call the mesh. Call the name as our bone to process. Okay. Now we're going to create a variable, call that physics alpha. I'm going to set that to 0. And from here we're going to set all bodies below simulate physics, just like up here. Make sure we tick this box. We want it to simulate. We're going to plug in the mesh and the bone name. Nice, simple, easy beginning to a series of events. So next, I'm going to add another custom event. Call that animation to simulation. This event has the same 2 inputs on it. Again, we have a skeletal mesh component object reference, and we have a bone to process from. Mesh again. From this, we're going to call out our physics alpha again, set that, and this time we're going to call finterp2. I'm going to do it on constant. You could use the others, however you so will. There's a few ways to change the physics alpha. So this I like to put onto delta seconds. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a cough today. And our current is going to be our physics alpha. Target is 1. Interp speed, put that at 1, but this could be promoted to a variable and changed however you needed it to. And from here we're going to set all bodies below physics blend weight. So with this, we'll interpolate this value if we keep firing it, and we'll set that value. So we plug in the mesh and bone name like the event above, and that's another nice simple beginning. Now the next event, this is where things get a bit complicated to explain, so I might come back to do that after I've built it. I'll try and explain some as I go along. So we have another custom event. We'll call this simulation to animation. This one is going to have an extra input on it. We have the skeletal mesh component object reference, which is already appearing here. We'll call that mesh. Another one, this is going to be our name. Again, that's bone to process. These are all going to have the same variable fired into them. Then we're going to give it a boolean as well. This can be bone is simulating Okay, so from this we're going to have a branch, and our condition for this branch is if our bone is simulating and boolean, we're going to find out if our bone that we're processing is the leader, equal name. We'll find out if this bone is the leader of our physics body. If it is the leader of our physics body, which is the pelvis in the default mannequin. Oh no, plug wrong one. Plug that into the and. So the bone is simulating, and it's the pelvis. We're going to set this branch, and on this branch we're going to do something a little bit fruity. We're going to set all bodies below simulate physics. Below simulate physics, I'm going to set it off. And then I'm going to turn it back on again, but not for self, so that's the pelvis. Once we plug these in, I'm going to use these again, so adding a couple of reroute nodes makes things a bit clearer. Plug those in. So now we're firing. If the pelvis is simulating, I'm turning its simulation off, and then quickly turning it back on for everything else. Right. And the next thing we're going to do is set our physics alpha. I'm going to pull this off of false, and we're also going to go into it if we do set that as well. So let's pull those up there a bit. Down, see what's going on. Then next we're going to do the same thing as up here. We're going to set all bodies below physics blend weight, and this needs the same target, the same bone name, and plug in the physics alpha too. You could skip custom physics type if you didn't want things. Same here. If you didn't want things to be interpolating, you want to set them separately. There are ways around. And okay, after this, the interesting bit, well, it gets interesting to explain. I'm going to branch again, and then from this branch we're going to set world transform component. What component are we going to transform? We're going to transform the mesh that is simulating. I'm only going to transform that. Only going to transform that if it's the pelvis that we are processing. I'll come back and neaten this up a bit better later. Now, the transform that we're going to want to set it to, let's that transform. That transform, I'm going to compose a transform off of A, and we're going to get the world transform from B. I'm just going to keep this nice and tidy. Right. We get the world transform from B. And the alpha is the same as, it's going to be this physics alpha, which we haven't yet set up yet. I'll do that in just a moment. And right, okay, the physics alpha. This time I'm going to finterp without being on constant, so I get a little bit of a curve going on. It's the same as before. We're going to get the physics over there, and I'm going to put world delta seconds in. This time our target wants to be 0, but I'm going to keep the same interpolation speed for now. It could also be separate variable from the one above, or use the same variable. Yeah, that's how we want to do that bit. Put that across there, and then I can put you here and pull you down a bit and pull you up a bit, and you can see what's going on, kind of. Do I need that? No. Okay, so the transform that we're going to lerp to, we're going to need to compose. No, it's not compose, it's make transform. I want to make a transform. This transform wants to be the relative transform between the mesh and the capsule component. I'm going to come back and waffle about that capsule component after I've finished setting up this event, and I explain how it works, because this is the main tricky and complicated bit. In fact, I might wait until I've done the event after this before I come back and explain, because they tie in together. So this transform is relative transform of our mesh here. This is minus 97 and minus 90 for me. It could be 270 if freshly opened a project, but when I went to change these and they automatically changed to this for me, so I'm just going to leave them like this because that's what the engine wanted me to do. So yeah, take these two variables here, they're going to become variables. We have minus 97 and minus 90. So that's the relative transform of our mesh. Before it gets simulated, we'll plug that into A. Next for B, we need to get the world transform. Let's get the character owner for now. I might change this. I'm going to change up a bunch of stuff to add in some more functionality in a future tutorial for this, I think. So this will get changed, but for now we can just get the root component of our character owner, get the world transform again, and that becomes our target, because this lerp is going backwards because we're starting from 1 and interpolating to 0. So this lerp's going backwards basically. So we're going from B to A. B, the transform of B. This is where things get a little bit interesting. The transform of B is very relative to the location of to the transform of the leader of the physics body hierarchy. This is the very top of the physics body. This is the first bone. Now, pelvis is actually connected to root, but because there isn't a body on the root bone, pelvis is the leader of the physics asset. So we need to, if it's the leader of the physics asset, when we set it to simulate, the whole mesh is getting disconnected from the capsule component here. So if we set it to no longer simulate, it's not going to come back to where we were where the camera is, where we're standing. I think I haven't plugged any of this in, so I should just be able to show that quickly. If I come in here, if I can get him to, can I hit his pelvis anyway? No. Let's set that up quickly. I need to show this really. Let's go into the character component here, and we'll just get button press for, let's go for T, keyboard key for T, and when we press that, we'll get our mesh, and we'll set all bodies below, simulate physics, in bone name, just make a little name. Quickly set that to pelvis. When we press T, everything will start simulating for the pelvis. Tick the box, and let's get the keyboard set up for Y. So that's next to T, and I'm going to do the same thing again, but turn it off so I can show you what's going on. So, when I set the pelvis to simulate, if I tell it to unsimulate, it's not working. Why is it not working? Because I forgot to tick the box. Untick that box. So many times with those damn ticky boxes. Right. So we set him to simulate, and then we move away from him. See, our mesh has been disconnected from our character. He's no longer following us. Of course, he's simulating. Now, if we set him back, that pelvis has just gone back to where it was in world space before. So, and we're not, nor are we connecting back to the character mesh. So this is what makes things complicated. Now, yeah, so I can even set him to simulate again. I can move him around. If I can't run into him, I don't have the collision set on the capsule. We set it to not overlap, so we didn't. Yeah, never mind. If I set him back to simulate, can you see? He's at a different angle. It's all relative to where this leader of the physics asset. Let's call it where the leader of the physics asset is, the physics leader. That's pretty much the same as getting the world transform here. I could get this off the mesh and it would probably look almost the same. So what I'm doing here, because there's issues with, I had a lot of issues trying to interpolate this while it was simulating. So instead of interpolating it while it's simulating, I turn it off quickly and then turn it back on for everything underneath it. So now we're effectively switching the control of this leader here and the interpolation of it. We're swapping that into a lerp from the physics alpha. So instead of manipulating it with its physics alpha, we're now setting it to not be simulating in whichever position it happened to be in while it was simulating, and then we're getting that world transform, which is where it would have been, and we're lerping that to where we want it to be, which is connected to the root component, this character owner, which is this capsule collision, which we cannot remove or edit. Same with this and the mesh, because they're very closely related and tied into how the character works. I had to dig around on the internet a bit, and it took a fair bit of rummaging to find out a piece of information that was that I was actually, the mesh was disconnecting from the capsule when it was becoming simulated from the leader of the physics body. So, well, from the leader physics body. So, yeah, that's what needs to be worked around, because you can't change the capsule component. Well, you can, but you need to make your own separate C++ blueprint to be able to do that, which I'm not nearly confident enough in C to be able to do. So, yeah, that's how this works. Let's make sure I've got this right. I've tried to explain it so many times. So if we are the pelvis and it's simulating, tell it not to anymore, and we tell everything else to go back to simulating. Then we set the physics alpha for that. I'm keeping include self here because I actually want to keep the physics alpha, even though it's not doing anything because the simulate physics has been turned off for the pelvis. I want to keep this leader physics body's physics alpha. I want to keep it there because it's going to become conditioned in the future. It's going to become part of the condition for when this actually fires. So I think that is this function covered. Oh, another ticky box, naughty ticky box. Okay, that wants to be teleport. Let me check where I did the. I don't know. That's in the next event. Also, I need to check that. So, simulate, not simulate. Set the physics alpha. Interpolated on a curve this time as opposed to a constant value. Well, not directly on a curve, but does its own thing. Then we're setting the physics blend weight, and then if we're the pelvis, we're setting the transform because we've turned off the simulation for it and can now bring it back to where it was without having it spinning all over the place so much. So yeah, that's this fiddly bit set up. Now the final function, we're going to add a function, final event. We're going to add a custom event. We're going to call that finish / unset simulation. Now this function is going to have a boolean, and it's also going to have a name, and it's going to have skeletal mesh component object reference. Name these up. Mesh bone to process boolean. Print boolean. What was that called? Bone is simulating. Because I haven't recorded this little bit 100 times already. Now, from here, we're going to branch, and if we're simulating, if the bone that's coming through here is simulating, we're going to tell it to stop. So, set all bodies below simulate physics. Plug that in there, plug that in there. May as well reroute these while I'm at it. Now, we've done that. We're going to want to branch again, I think. Yeah, we're going to want to branch. And we're going to want to plug that false in here. So this is only going to happen if we're simulating. We'll carry on. Then we're going to attach to component. This is the essential part that brings him completely back to the character. Without doing this, we'd be stuck lerping the transform constantly. So attach to a component, then the parent is this root component that we've already called. I've already rang up and said, hey, we're going to come give your child back. Then we're going to target as our mesh. That's its baby. So, let's see what's going on here. I'm going to set this all to snap to target. That's how I like to do this. This might need to be changed depending on what you're doing. In fact, this whole attachment process could get very complicated depending on your project and how your character might work. But that's not really for me to figure out, I guess. Well, I can figure out some of it maybe in a future video. I'm going to add to this so that I can have this functioning on mutilated body parts that fly around the place. Well, I already have this functioning on mutilated body parts, but I've had to rework this whole process. Next up, set relative. Oh, I'd have like a spell, wouldn't it? Set relative transform of the component. The component that we want to set the relative transform back to is the mesh, and the new transform is its old relative transform, which we have up here. Teleport, tick the box, tick the box. Right. So that is finish function. So when this fires, we're going to see if it's simulating, set it not to simulate anymore if it isn't simulating. The condition for this is if we are pelvis again. So equal name. If we are equal to pelvis, plug that in. Don't do anything off false. Okay, so that is that function set up. So these are the 4 main functions that we're going to be firing quite a lot whenever a bone is in this simulation cache. I'm going to take a little break and have something to eat because I'm really hungry, and then I'll come back and I will put all these together into one event that comes off. So I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to move it down a bit. And I tell you what, may as well add one more custom event. I'm going to call this one interpolate physics. And we're going to give it one input, and that's going to be a name, which is our bone to process. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that there like that. Come back in a moment and wrap this up.